Vanessa Lavorato.
Yes.
Did I say the name correctly?
Yes. Yeah.
Amazing, because sometimes people switch the O and the A, right? Especially when they're writing it out.
Lavorata.
Yeah.
I get Alvarado. I'm like, that's a street.
Yeah, that's exactly it is. But you published an amazing book that's near and dear to my heart and my lifestyle. It's How to Eat Weed and Have a Good Time. Came out tax day, April 15th. So as soon as people were done with their taxes, they went out and got this, hopefully.
That's right. Hopefully, if they knew what they were doing.
Well, it's on Simon Schuster.
Yes,
You're
legit.
a big shot author. Wow.
Thank you.
The correlation between cannabis and food is a very, very important relationship that I love that you cover. And you cover it like I was going through the PDF. I mean, wow, you get intrinsic with it. It's not just recipes. But tell me about this relationship, this important dynamic between cannabis and food, and how you discovered that they go together. Like,
as far as smoking cannabis and then eating something really, really delicious right after, it kind of, for me, it helped me get out of this weird kind of paranoid feeling I had of, am I ever going to feel normal again? Because I smoked a really strong strain of weed. I grew up in the Bay Area, Northern California, and we have kind of legendary cannabis growing there. So that was kind of my, jump into smoking and then eating, and then cooking with cannabis was 420 in Santa Cruz. Someone gave me a big jar of canna butter and I put the whole thing into a pie. So I was like, I'm going to make an apple pie. I have to make it, if I'm going to do something, it needs to be really cool. And it was really delicious too. So I ate too much, and that was my first experience with edibles. And it took me several days to kind of shake off that edible, sluggish kind of high you can get, especially when you don't really know what you're doing. I didn't know the potency of the butter. There was no information.
Right.
There was no milligrams.
that's why your book is so necessary.
Yes. And even to this day, like for home cooks, there isn't too much information out there about how to do it, how long it takes. Everything seems really complicated and kind of scary. Like, oh, if you don't do it this way, you're doing it wrong. And it's really quite easy to cook with cannabis. We've been doing it, humans have been doing it for centuries. It's there's a long tradition of cooking with cannabis, and the plant comes from Asia, and so you see it all over India, and then it spread like a weed all around the world. And so of course as cooks, we're curious, and when we see a new plant to put in our food, and it has this special property that it makes us feel high, or it can make us feel sleepy. It can, it has all of these different compounds in it that interact with our bodies. And so it's just, for me, like a light bulb went off, and I was like, I want to learn more. And when I didn't find the information, I was like, well, how do I find it?
Well, and one thing about your book is that it's like I said at the top, it's not just recipes. Like, you get into the science of it. You get into now. Anyone who's a weed aficionado and gets into edibles always has that horror story of they ate too much and they realize. Talk to me a little bit about dosing and how important it is when it comes to edibles for you to kind of know how much you're taking and what the right level of enjoyment versus crossing over into some crazy psychedelic journey.
Oh my goodness. Well, it all depends on the person. Senior citizens who need hundreds of milligrams, and you wouldn't expect it, but that's what their body requires. Or you'll have like a 6'5" football player who's like, I can't even handle 2 milligrams. So it really depends on your body, and edibles are so different than smoking because our body metabolizes it differently. Our liver sends out enzymes and it converts it to a different type of THC. And that feels different than when you smoke. You also can't control how high you get after you eat it. Like there was smoking, okay, I'm going to stop smoking, and you won't get any higher than you already are. With edibles, you're on whatever trip that cookie puts you on, and that whoever made it, that's their responsibility, right? It's a big responsibility to dose people, just like when we look at our bartenders to make sure people aren't getting too intoxicated with alcohol. We need to look at our edible makers, and that's at home too. So this book is here to teach people how to do that.
Right.
And I think when we look at smoking, we go, oh, I can smoke a gram easily. I mean, I could smoke an eighth in a day. But if I put that into an edible, I couldn't eat a gram of weed in a day. That's on average 200 milligrams. I don't need that much.
Right.
In my day. So I think that's kind of the disconnect that we have when we go to cook with cannabis. We're like, oh, we need a lot. And that was what I initially thought. And then you start doing the math and you're like, oh no, we do not, a little bit goes a long way. So if you're really trying to stretch your weed, edibles are the way to do it. Wow. You just have to make them at home.
When I've cooked with edibles, when I used to make the cookies and the brownies and stuff, we used to make the butter, right?
Yeah.
So what happens? I mean, can you just throw weed into like a sauce, or do you need to do the butter stuff? And also, what happens to the weed when you cook it? I mean, there's a word that you use.
Decarboxylation.
That's what it is. What is decarboxylation?
When we heat weed, anytime we heat it, even if you just cut the plant down or you let it go as far as die in the field, it will start to decarboxylate even at room temperature. You're converting THCA, the acidic form of the cannabinoid THC, into the active THC. It's a more stable form of THC, so it wants to be there. If you continue to heat it and expose it to oxygen and light, it will degrade, and that's called CBN. And you'll see that all over the dispensaries. Everyone is selling CBN products because it's good for sleep. When we smoke, the heat from the cherry activates the weed, and then we breathe in that THC, right? When we hit a bong, same thing. When we cook with cannabis, you know, if I just put it into oil and I didn't heat it for long enough, all of that THCA might not convert to THC. It won't. So we preheat it to ensure we're getting all of that potency, because it's really expensive, right? It's an expensive herb. So that's why you heat it first. You can decarboxylate and infuse at the same time. It just takes substantially longer, and you don't really need to soak the plant in a warm fat or alcohol for very long.
But you can't just, like, for instance, you can't just eat a nug.
You can,
it's not gonna
and
get
like
you high.
it won't really. Most of that THCA won't be activated.
Okay.
Probably like a little bit, because they sit on the shelves in dispensaries. So
Right.
yeah, a little bit will be active, because it's just sitting there. So it's slowly converting to THC.
Okay.
It's so complicated.
Yeah, no,
I'm
I love the
sorry.
science. I mean, but what you got degrees in? I
I'm
read
an art history
and Italian, but
studies
look how
double
much
major.
science. You know, hey, you know, you can find a lot out on the internet and by experimenting yourself.
Yeah, and reading books.
And reading books,
yeah.
and now you wrote a book. So obviously smoking makes you hungry. And that
Yeah.
was one of the, you know, when I started smoking as a teenager, I realized, oh, I mean, I would already get hungry, but it was
Right.
just such a great appetite, especially if you had like a big meal planned, you know?
Yeah.
When you eat edibles, does it make you hungry?
Yeah, it can. I mean, again, it depends on your body. It depends on, so now there are these new kind of minor cannabinoids that we're looking into, like THCV. And that's the hot girl in town right now. She's, you know, everyone wants THCV because it's supposed to suppress your appetite. And I have a lot of people who are like, hey, I love weed, but I don't want to get the munchies. I'm not trying to plow through
Right.
a bag of potato chips in
Right.
one sitting. And that's where you start to see these cultivators who are like, okay, what do these other cannabinoids do? Like CBG, THCV, CBN, degraded THC, which is good for sleep. So that's where we're really kind of seeing now with legalization what can happen. And I wanted to answer something you asked as far as like infusing a butter and an oil. You don't have to do that. Once you've already decarboxylated flour, you can throw it into your brownie mix. It's probably not going to taste very good. I put it directly into something like meatballs.
Okay.
Because you're not going to taste it.
Right.
There's garlic, there's my grandma's meatball recipe, which is in my cookbook. There's garlic, there's Parmesan, there's ricotta, there's all this other stuff that you won't taste a little bit of cannabis in there. For something like the vanilla wafers in here, you probably don't want chunks of weed in like a very simple cookie like that. So you want to use a butter. But all you're doing, the cannabis plant creates these things called trichomes. That's where all the potency is. It's like this sticky gland that it produces this resin. And we're trying to get those trichomes off of the plant. We're just trying to wash it off. It happens very quickly when you use a warm butter or fat. It's fat soluble. Alcohol will do the same thing. So we're using butter, oil, alcohol to dissolve this resin, this oil that's on the outside of the plant. We're not after anything in the actual plant itself. And when you talk to cultivators, they say they're not growing plants, they're growing trichomes.
Interesting.
Yeah, so that's what it's all about.
Wow, I'm learning something. I thought I knew so much about weed. Now trichomes.
I'm a real nerd.
Yeah, it's amazing. Okay, so you brought up like putting weed in meatballs. One interesting thing about your recipes, and also we can get into now some of your personal entrepreneurship. Marigold Sweets is your company, and really how you got into being a professional infuser. Obviously, it's sweets. So for me, edibles, when I think of infusing, pot into food, I think sweets first.
Of
that
course.
matches. When I started watching Bong Appétit, which is coming back, by the way, congratulations. You're a host of on Vice. I realized, you can put weed in meatballs and like savory and salty stuff. But for yourself, you think it's same, or do you still think, but it's preferred in sweets? It just matches sweets more?
The reason that sweets are so prevalent in the industry is because sugar's a preservative. So edibles that need to sit in dispensary shelves, like they can't serve meatballs. I wish they could. I'm sure they would sell out. If there was like a meatball shop that's like, these are weed meatballs, don't get any ideas. There are a lot of like restrictions when it comes to creating cannabis products. Like you have to go through rigorous lab testing. And so your product sits there while it's going through all that lab testing. And that's why it's a lot of candy and things with a long shelf life, which sugar helps extend that. So I think that's, and also sugar makes things taste good.
Right.
So this plant isn't necessarily something that people like to taste. I enjoy the flavor, but sometimes people don't like it. So that chocolate will cover pretty much everything, and sugar really helps make things taste good. So
tell me about the days when you started Marigold Sweets. What prompted you to start it? And also, I'm very fascinated about anyone that starts a successful brand in a very grassroots way. And I read that you basically were getting people in the Bay Area. I'm assuming that this was like the rise of the technocracy there, and maybe some of them were like fixated on your chocolates, or maybe not. Maybe just the Bay Area culture. You were doing it like kind of like people, but artists that sell CDs out of the trunk of their car and then they make it big.
Yeah.
Tell me about those early days as the entrepreneur of Marigold Sweets.
Well, I was, just getting out of college. I didn't know what I was going to do next, but I had seen what was available in dispensaries at the time. I had my medical card and we were under Prop 215, so patients could make products for other patients. You weren't paying for the edibles, you're paying for the time to make them and the expense. That was our little like workaround. So it was like snickerdoodles and brownies. And like I said, they don't really have a long shelf life. But I worked at See's Candy, so I knew that candy had a long shelf life. And I've also just always been obsessed with candy. So I just started playing around, and I had a friend who gave me a big bag of cold water hash. She was a cultivator up in Humboldt. And that was the first time I started cooking with concentrates, and that was a big game changer. So hash, I was talking about that resin that's on the outside of the plant. Hash is a concentration of that resin. So you don't, it takes that whole infusion step out of the equation, because you can just take that hash, drop that into a fat and whisk it in, and you're done. That made it so I could control the dose. It improved the flavor, and I started making caramel. And I mean, when I first started, I didn't know what I was doing. I'm self-taught. I didn't know how to temper chocolate. I didn't know any of it. And they weren't great. But when you put cannabis into anything, people will buy it because it gets them high. And so that was my side hustle. I was working in a clothing store, this really high-end but artistic, kind of quirky, family-owned clothing store called Modern Appealing Clothing in San Francisco. And their customers would get the chocolates from me, and I would put them in a broken microwave in the bathroom, and they'd put the cash in, and they'd take the boxes.
Did you feel like a drug dealer?
Yeah, I mean, I was a drug dealer. I mean, to the federal government, I still am a drug dealer.
Wow.
So, because it's a Schedule 1, right? So it felt risky, but I was very quiet about it. If you knew, you knew. If you didn't know, you didn't need to know. And it was all word of mouth. It helped pay for me to be in Rome when I did an internship in Rome. You know, I didn't have any income because it was an internship. So you still need to feed yourself and all of that. I had my sales rep, Chloe, in San Francisco selling boxes for me and sending me money so I could afford to do things. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Our guests don't even know what is coming. So you could just sprinkle a little weed in there.
Can I?
Can we?
I mean, you can.
Okay.
So what's going on with Bon Appetit? Is it going to be like episodes that like it was on Viceland, like typical half-hour episodes, or is it going to be an online platform kind of thing where clips? Like what are we going to be watching?
I think it's like TBD. I mean, the episode that they just put out for 420, both Be Real and I are executive producers on that. I definitely think there's an audience for this kind of content, and Vice has always been on the cutting edge when it comes to covering cannabis. They don't do it in a way that feels like it's making fun of the community. It feels like it's informative and educational and fun.
Well, I mean, it's cool that you've put it all together and are able to speak and write about it, you know, where they're hosting the show or this book that I think is going to be very successful for a long time. I feel like it's like you're setting the pace. So I saw the recipes. When you get into the recipes, man, these are some intricate recipes. My God.
Not all of them, but yes, some of them are a little like, you know, there's candy making in here, there's pastry, there are cakes.
What's the easiest one that I should start off with and then build my way up to something a little bit more complicated?
Okay, so there's the honey firecrackers, and those are just saltines, and you just melt butter, and it's
sweet.
Let me show you. They're really great. They're a good snack.
How about healthy? What's the healthiest thing
The healthiest would be the hummus.
Yeah?
Yeah, of course.
Nice.
Chickpea, you get a lot of fiber from hummus. And you could put that into the devil's lettuce cup. There's a salsa verde recipe in here. And there is a guacamole, but I feel like it might offend your audience because it says you can use olive oil, but I'll tell you this. I grew up in Canada, and avocados were very hard to come by, right? So what my mother would do not cringe, she would cut the guacamole with mayonnaise. And some people, I know it's horrible.
No, I think that it's a great, first of all, I think my audience, they'll be fine with it. Any guacamole,
We'll
it's kind of like pizza. It's like there's no such thing as a bad pizza, even if it's bad. By the way, I can say bruschetta. How do you say it?
Bruschetta.
Bruschetta. Okay, I saw that.
You can say, I know, people got so mad. I was just joking around. No. I really didn't think it was
Don't
that big of a deal.
Don't read the comments.
I always clap back. I'm the worst. I'm like, you can say it right. If
you seem so nice, but you can't. But if you read a comment, you're like, oh, I gotta answer this.
You know
bastard.
what? People do look at me and they go, she's so nice. I'm like, you must not know any Sicilian or Calabrese women. Like, you would not think that looking at me. Then you'd know what's coming underneath the surface.
Interesting.
We are all of this mafia culture worship. You know, everyone wants to be a wise guy, whatever. There's that. I think it's so silly. Those are my people, right?
Yeah.
The Sicilians, that's where mafia comes from. Calabria, that's where Ndrangheta comes from.
Is that why you felt comfortable jumping into this like renegade outlaw industry, male dominated, and you show up and you just hold your space
yes. Yes, 1,000%. Yeah, I think Italians are really drawn to this industry. I've noticed there are a lot of Italians in this industry because, you know, we're like, what? It's a plant. Why wouldn't you smoke it or eat it? Although it's not legal in Italy. It's not legalized.
Well, hopefully it's going to get there. So to finish off, what's your favorite recipe in that book?
Oh my goodness, there are so many. Definitely the meatballs are up there. Favorite recipe in this cookbook. but I want it to be something that's approachable for your audience. I think the drinks are really fun.
Yeah,
to
what
be
do you got?
honest with you.
So how do you make a cannabis infused drink? You put like the
It's
the
alcohol
butter?
soluble
Oh, I
as
see.
well. And then
Okay.
some of these call for milk, right? So there's fat in milk. You could
Okay.
use cream. You could infuse cream. But usually I would put a tincture or, like there's a cannabis chai here. But a lot of them do call for tincture, like the Great Beyond Fizz. I just think it's fun to have a sippable edible. It puts it into a different format.
When you enter like a new social group, especially here in LA, and there's a lot of industry people, there's tech people from, when you were in the Bay Area, there's all these, but you walk in and you're part of the cannabis industry to a certain,
Yeah.
degree and stuff. Is there like, going back to that little outlaw air that kind of carries with that, does that kind of make you feel, I mean, you're already cool, obviously, but does that give you like a little bump of cool when I work in the cannabis industry?
I think it makes people worried about anything I bring to a dinner or
Oh,
a
that's
potluck
hilarious.
or event. They always think I have weed in it. I'm like, listen, one of the biggest rules in this cookbook is that you label everything and you tell people that you're dosing them. If I put weed in food, you will know. that
You've
there
never
is.
been like, oh, you ate all that? Oops. You should probably sit down.
No. And if there have been accidents, those stories are in this book, and they're there to teach you to not do what I've done.
Amazing.
So,
And
yeah.
how long did it take you to write the book?
Years.
Congrats. Fantastic.
Thank you.
So how do we eat weed and have a good time? That second part is the most important part.
Yes.
You got to have a good time. You don't want to have a bad time. Simon Schuster, author Vanessa Lavorato, and she will be also appearing in Bong Appétit. So check out for that. I want to thank you for being on Check It Out.
Thank you so much.